Andy Barr's taking this money from pharmaceutical companies and from healthcare companies because that's who he's going to work for. They didn't give him that money because he was funny at a dinner party. They gave him that money because they wanted something from him. So when that health insurance company can deny my mother when she spends a couple days in the emergency room, they paid Andy Barr for that privilege. And if they came to me, I'd tell them, don't come in here with your corporate PAC money because I'm not interested. And I'm going to go to work for the regular people who you've caused to suffer. I'm Josh Hicks, and I approve this message.
Very excited this evening to have with us Josh Hicks. And if you don't know, you ought to know, Josh Hicks is running for Congress in the 6th District of Kentucky, which is where I live, Lexington, Kentucky, and the counties surrounding it. And as you all know, we are the Mitch McConnell Retirement Committee, so we're very focused on Mitch McConnell's retirement. And why in the world, then, would we be talking to Josh Hicks? So we're going to try to kind of connect those dots for you folks. But first off, just welcome, Josh. Thank you so much for joining us. And what does your sign say today?
Well, Aaron, first of all, thank you all for having me, and thanks to the Mitch McConnell Retirement Committee for the work you do. Let's see, my protest sign today would say corporate corruption kills, because I believe that to be true. And nothing more pertinent to have directed that sign than my opponent's debacle, where he refused to return some money from Purdue Pharma, who recently pled guilty to criminal acts for poisoning communities with opioid pills. And so corporate corruption kills is the message that speaks to me today, and I think it probably speaks to those who oppose Mitch McConnell's agenda as well.
Yeah, clearly Mitch McConnell is a guy who, the only problem with, tainted money is there taint enough of it, right? Like, that guy does not have a problem accepting money from the worst people. But tell me, so what's the connection? Like, why are you a natural guest for Moscow Mitch Monday? What's the connection between Andy Barr and Mitch McConnell?
Well, as everyone may or may not know, Andy Barr was one of Mitch McConnell's interns. And so Andy Barr owes a tremendous debt to Mitch McConnell for sort of springboarding his political career that has now spanned more than 15 years, and been for the benefit of Mr. Barr and Mr. McConnell, but been to the detriment of Kentuckians, not only here in the 6th District, but all across this state. And so I look forward to taking down one of those interns and making sure we show Mitch that his control of this state is absolutely not going to continue for one day more.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I like to call them Mitch's minions, right? So the folks he spawned into the political landscape, like, they're not as bumbling or as cute, and the actual impacts they have are horrible. But, Dan Cameron obviously is one of Mitch's minions, and we're seeing the fallout of that right now in a wholly unprepared and unqualified individual ends up running, the Attorney General's office solely because of his political connections. When we've got Secretary of State Michael Adams, he also comes from Mitch's kind of bloodline, right? If you're looking at horse racing, there's like a clear connection for these folks. And despite his own political instincts, we've actually gotten decent elections thanks to, I think, our governor. Like, he gets not nearly enough credit for forcing a good plan out of the Secretary of State's office. I think that Andy Barr has learned a lot from Mitch McConnell. And the number one thing that I think, unfortunately, he has learned is to just attack mercilessly his opponent. The attack ads that have been leveled against you are just astounding. Right. And I think it's problematic for a whole number of reasons, right? Because these congressional races, people don't know much about them, right? There's not a lot of free media coverage on the race. So a lot of people, disengaged voters, all they know is what they've seen on TV. And to your credit, your ads are phenomenal. I think they do a really good job of telling your story. But Andy's, they're all attack ads. What's your favorite of Andy's attack ads that you've learned new things about yourself, I'm sure, as you watch them?
My favorite has been the consistent theme of believing that a lie backed by millions of corporate dollars can defeat the actual truth. So when he attacks my service as a Marine and suggests that I don't know how to keep Americans safe, when he attacks my service as a police officer and says I don't know how to keep our communities safe, those are two things that get me fired up, because my background and Barr's background couldn't be any more different. My demonstrated dedication to public service and his demonstrated dedication to corporate interests are sort of the biggest contrast in this race. And the second piece of that I think is so harmful, that although I think that there's a lot of frivolity there and a lot of kind of garbage nonsense, The second harmful thing that Andy Barr obviously learned very well from Mitch McConnell is that lies are a foundational part of their campaign platform. And let me tell you, it's a tremendous shame, not only that you would have someone in a position of public trust willing to break that public trust for personal benefit, but it's a shame that we have someone who spent 8 years in the House of Representatives, 6 of those years in the majority, 2 of those years with a Republican president, a Republican Senate, and a Republican-led House of Representatives. And still he doesn't have a laundry list of accomplishments for Kentucky to run on. That's a shame. And it shows and speaks to the failure he has been as a representative for the people of Kentucky. I'm sure for him, it has been very successful. But for the people of Kentucky, it's been devastating. And it's what I look forward to reversing starting January of 2021.
So, Kimberly, you have any questions for Josh?
Yes, Josh. We just love you in Kentucky and beyond. Right now I'm in Delaware, and they've heard of you here in Delaware, which is amazing, and you have support here as well. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for your service, your military service to this country, and we really appreciate that. However, I would like to ask a really big question that's been on my mind. And what I've been hearing is that Barr is also using the untimely passing of his wife to garner more sympathy for his campaign. Do you think that's been working?
You know, I'll say this. I can't imagine what the loss of his wife has done. I'm very fortunate to have not experienced that particular type of trauma in my life. And so I have a really hard time putting myself in a position to try to understand or be able to sort of figure out the best way forward from there, because I can't do it. I just can't put myself in those shoes. And I think from what I have heard, there have been people who do have sympathy for him, but there are far more people concerned with the policies he's pursued in Washington, D.C., and the way that he's sold people out to corporations. That has been the main thrust of what people have told me about why they believe Andy Barr needs to go.
Yeah, that's great. I think, so we were just talking earlier, you've got an amazing biography. I feel like it's this kind of Horatio Alger kind of like amazing story coming from a rural background, not a silver spoon in your mouth. You've got, coming to I think play football in college and then not finishing because, that's my nephew did that exact thing. And going to join the Marines, deploying from a trailer, and then coming back, becoming family man and a police officer, and then putting yourself through law school and becoming an attorney. And I think it's all amazing. I mean, this is fantastic. You inspire me, Josh. It's great that this story is out there, and I think it inspires a lot of people, and it should as we tell it. But one thing that and it gets back to the attack ads. You're a successful attorney in Lexington. I hear the ads, the radio ads, right? Hicks and Funston. I do not know how to spell your partner's last name, but I hear it on the radio. And this has been a central part of Andy Barr's attacks against you, right? And it's part of like, if you're conservative, I guess somehow the idea that, there's a liberal mob out there and they're in cahoots with trial lawyers and Nancy Pelosi all together, right? So tell me why, and I know, and I can tell you, but it's your interview, we're interviewing you. So you tell me, why is that legal piece actually a part of what you're doing?
And, it's been a shame because, I'm kind of everything that Andy Barr pretends that he's in favor of. A veteran, a former law enforcement officer, someone who came from a hard-scrabble background, who worked very hard and became a successful small business owner. And yet throughout the course of this campaign, all he has been able to do is try to tear me down, right? Tear down all the things he claims in public that he supports, including my law firm. But let me tell you, I am proud to do the work that I do because we represent individuals, people, living and breathing human beings who have been harmed through the negligence of others. And in a couple of those cases, they were bad corporate actors who did bad things that hurt people. And I'm very proud to be able to help those families and to be able to help those people when they've been harmed that way. I think Barr feels very threatened by someone like me because I worked for every single thing I got. And I made sure that I'm not beholden to anybody. None of the pictures of Nancy Pelosi that he puts on these ads to try to tell lies about me have any effect on me, because I didn't run this race because of Nancy Pelosi. I didn't run this race because of the Democratic Party. I ran this race because Andy Barr is a sellout and a liar who has broken the public trust and needs to be removed from a position of power. That's why I'm in this race. And so all of the things he says about me just further highlights his failure. Because if I am here, Aaron, 8 years later, running against an opponent, and I am not instead running about the rural broadband initiatives I brought home, the efforts I've made in combating the opioid epidemic with real reform and real treatment, the opportunities I've helped provide through public education, the opportunities I've helped provide through workforce development and infrastructure improvements all around this district, then please feel free to call me out on it, Aaron, and tell me, Josh, 8 years ago, you told us you were going to deliver these things, and today, all you can do is run negative ads. I will promise you, you will not have to have me on for that interview, because I will either get it done or I will tell everybody exactly who stood in my way, exactly who stopped me, so that we can be better informed moving forward. I don't believe that lying, I don't believe that building a position of power on lies and abusing the public trust serves anybody. It certainly doesn't serve our democracy, and it should be disqualifying for folks like Andy Barr.
That's great. Yeah, I concur. I would hope that, when you come from a position where you've been in the party in power for a lot of your political career, that you should have delivered for your district. And time and time again, he doesn't have anything to point to. All he's got is beating up on you, trying to define you in ways that divide our district even further. And ignores your absolute background, your impeccable background, your actual biography. Like, oh yeah, you're part of the liberal mob, which is why you were a police officer from Eastern Kentucky. Like, it makes no sense. There's no way you can believe the truth and what he tells you. But he's like just banking on the fact that not enough people know the truth, and he can sway people with garbage and lies, and it's infuriating. I don't know how you deal with it. I get so angry, like I need to step away from the television because I want to keep my television, right? And it's like it is outrageous what he's putting on there, and I think we need to think through the truth in advertising and in political advertising, because what is happening right now is so just out of bounds in terms of having no tethering to reality and what people are telling us. Kimberly, got any final question for Josh?
I think he has handled Andy Barr's attacks with such class, truth, and determination. Josh, being in Eastern Kentucky and seeing what's going on in Kentucky with the leadership, or should I say non-leadership, of Mitch McConnell, what are some of the things that you intend to do in your district and for the whole state to bring unity, to bring respect, the respectability factor between your constituents and the police departments? And also the second part of the question is, what are your feelings about the FOP? Do you feel that they have entirely too much power at this point?
Kimberly, I appreciate you asking that question. Let me start with the first piece of that. What do I intend to do to heal the rift between communities, police departments? Frankly, it's going to be similar to the way we heal this political rift in our country. And for me, what that means is engaging with people who have a dedication to public service. Because if you are truly dedicated and laser focused on the public service aspect of any constitutional authority that you're granted, then you will, instead of seeking to divide people, seek to unite people. Because being a public servant means serving everyone equally. And I think it's not only in our political arena that we have gotten far away from the idea that we are all one Kentucky, we're all one America, and that although we might have ideological differences, there is a ground for us to stand as Kentuckians, as Americans, to talk to one another in a civil way, not engage in the lies, not engage in all the rhetoric, not engage in all the garbage that politics have become infested with. Similarly, we heal differences between communities and their police departments the same way. We make sure that we have community-led police departments that focus on community policing principles, and that feel like a part of the community, feel like they're from there, of there, and that serving that community is important to them. If we can bring that back and bring that mentality into focus, because I'm sure there are plenty of police officers that do have that focus. And so we should lift them up and support them. And for those who have forgotten that service, we need to make sure they either get their behavior corrected or they move on to a different career. And we bring communities, police departments together in that way with actual, we have to sit down and talk to one another. This cannot become some us versus them battle, because what we really need is an us working together battle. That's what we need, similar to our coronavirus response, right? We need to heal some of the division. And we only do that through appropriate action, through listening, through taking steps to make people feel valued, the Black community feel valued, rural communities feel valued. If we do that, dedicate ourselves to public service, it helps heal that rift. The FOP in particular, I'm a 17-year Fraternal Order of Police member. I have been since I was a police officer. And so I am a big fan of organized labor. I love the fact that labor can organize. I think we should be promoting more of that. But similarly, where you have folks that are not dedicated to the mission, which should be public service and promoting public service and looking out for the interests of police officers that had frankly been ignored, because there was a presidential budget that cut $460 billion in law enforcement funding that Andy Barr was in favor of. There have been numerous attempts, some successful, to separate out police officer pensions across this state and make them 25 years instead of 20 years, and then put them in a hybrid plan instead of a defined benefit plan. Those are not my politics. Those are things that I would like to work on behalf of, so that there is not a sense. And where we find FOP leaders that don't have that same dedication to getting those things involved, but instead want to play politics, we have to make sure those voices are instead converted to voices who are advocating for labor rights and labor rights for police officers that make sense, but also advocating for changes where there have to be changes. If we're not all pulling the same direction, we're pulling apart. And unfortunately, that only benefits a small handful of folks who can keep us divided, so that we don't see what's happening in our government, we don't see what's happening abroad, and we don't see what's happening around us. I think we have to make a concerted effort, put service at our center, engage in servant leadership, bring folks together, and start solving some of these hard problems that we're seeing on film, we're seeing in court cases, and we're seeing in the media every single day.
That's great. And I know we don't have you for too much longer. I know you've got a pretty active campaign schedule and it's a big final push, but I want to just say, it's interesting to watch, the conversation happening right now in our country. So we're racked by, coronavirus. We're going into not the third peak because we never actually, leveled off. Right. But it's going to be a rough winter. All experts, they said this at the beginning. Nothing has changed despite garbage information that's been put out by our ostensible leaders. And to hear Andy Barr talk about coronavirus, it's like he saved the day because he got some shipment of PPE into the district, right? Well, of course, why did it take heroic measures to get a shipment of PPE? Oh, because there was no federal leadership. And states were having to outbid each other to get necessary safeguards, right? So it was just a cluster at the highest degree and the highest level of leadership. And he did nothing to help that. And in fact, if you look at his track record on these relief bills, he's not been a useful actor, right? So we right now have a situation where the House has passed the HEROES Act. I don't know what your position is on the HEROES Act. Labor has been behind it. Everyone's behind it in terms of the Democratic coalition pushed it. Passed early on, before the summer. And then the Senate felt no sense of urgency, to quote Mitch McConnell, said that states and cities should just go the bankruptcy route. And if you want to talk about defunding the police, which, apparently is the only thing Democrats have said, because that's all the attack ads are talking about, is how the Democrats want to defund the police. You know what defunds the police is when states and cities have to go bankrupt and have to lay off staff. That's who actually gets defunded. That's how the police get defunded. And your opponent hasn't really said a lot about this, except for all the things the House are doing as part of this liberal wish list, and isn't. So tell me a little bit about what would you do? How would you deal with this if you were in DC right now, which you'd have to be dealing with a very divided You got the House has passed the HEROES Act. The White House says they want a pretty robust response right now, and the Senate has said don't pass anything. Mitch McConnell has said, quote, do not cut a deal with the White House, because that is not going to help us politically. Right. He has no sense of urgency. He doesn't care about what people are going through right now. The millions of people going into poverty, the millions of people who are food insecure, who might be put in the streets, and the cities and the states who are going to be going bankrupt if relief doesn't come. Like, how do you deal with that mess, Josh?
Well, first and foremost, you go in with a true dedication to finding a solution, first and foremost, to the coronavirus, not just the funding relief, because what we really have to do is present a united federal front. Here's how we combat the coronavirus. Here's how we stop the spread. Here's how we bring our death rate down. We're losing between 500 and 1,000 Americans every single day. I think we had more than 20 deaths of coronavirus here in Kentucky yesterday. And so we obviously haven't done a good job solving it. We haven't done a good job uniting and presenting a united message about how dangerous this thing is and how we can pull together as a Commonwealth, we can pull together as a country, and we can take it head on. If we get that accomplished, and we will, then we can turn to our legislative efforts. And our legislative efforts have to be laser focused. It has to be for small businesses, for the unemployed, for people on the margins who are, as you said, food insecure, for people who've lost healthcare coverage, for people who are struggling to put food on the table. And the failure to get one of those done, I think, speaks even further to Mitch McConnell's malfeasance, because him leaving us to fend for ourselves early in the pandemic and forcing states like Kentucky to bid against states like New York and the federal government with its unlimited buying power is unconscionable. But we are where we are. And unless we pull together, present a united front against this thing, bring down our cases, bring down our positivity rate, bring down our death rate, get everybody in a position where the legislation is actually going to be effective, that's how we're going to start to solve this thing, to turn it back around and then get relief into the hands of people who really, really need it right now.
And one final question. So I hear Andy Barr is all about protecting pre-existing conditions. What's your take on that?
My take on that is Andy Barr has proven himself over and over again to be a liar. And that is one of the most egregious lies he has told in this entire campaign. Because not only will he not protect in the future, he has never pretended to protect in the past. And if he had, Aaron, a plan, a bill, a piece of healthcare legislation that would protect people with pre-existing conditions, he would be waving it around right now instead of lying about me and his own position. So I'll say that I believe his willingness to lie to maintain political power should be disqualifying. Shouldn't have anybody in a position of public trust who's willing to lie directly to our faces.
Yeah, I concur. So what we have to say goodbye to you, but any final thoughts you want to give people as we ended this last week, this final sprint? Anything you want to tell people?
Just want to say first and foremost, Kimberly, Aaron, thank you all for having me on. It truly is a pleasure to be in this race. And anybody out there who has not voted yet, please go vote. And if you've already voted, call all your friends and family, call everybody you've ever known in your entire life. Tell them, get out and vote, because this election is going to be incredibly important. And we've got a huge opportunity to shape the direction of this country in the right way, to make sure we're taking care of people over corporate profits, to make sure that we're addressing their needs, and to make sure we have folks who will tell us the truth going forward. Thank you all so very much for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Good luck on the campaign trail.
Yes, sir.
A lot of folks were struggling even before this pandemic, struggling to pay their health insurance premiums, struggling to put gas in their truck, and struggling to put food on their table. I'm sick and tired of seeing Wall Street and wealthy corporations buy our politicians. I'm running because, look, we don't have to just sit back and take this. We can have a voice for Main Street, for rural communities, for folks who need good paying jobs, for family farms. That's the kind of voice I'm going to be. I'm Josh Hicks, and I approve this message.
Why we're doing this and why we think it's so important to revisit healthcare. We are persisting in our efforts because we have to. So, repealing and replacing Obamacare. We know Obamacare can't be fixed.